cracking. So I'd like to welcome Dr. Susanna Søberg. Susanna features in our November issue, so hopefully most of you have got your November magazines this month and may have already read our interview. Susanna is a Danish scientist. Her PhD research was in metabolism, and her most recent research has been on fat reduction through winter swimming. And it's the background to her new book, Winter Swimming, the Nordic Way Towards a Healthier and Happier Life. The book explores cold water traditions in Scandinavia and around the world, and why it is such a boost for our bodies and soul. It is another great book for a swimmer's bookshelf, giving us some great scientific background. So welcome, Susanna.
Thank you so much for inviting me, and thank you also for the interview to the magazine. So I'm very pleased to be here, very honored.
Just make sure everyone's muted apart from Susanna. Fantastic. Great. And I thought we'd start with, where are you and where was your most recent swim?
I am in north of Copenhagen in Denmark, and my recent swim was yesterday, and the water was 10 degrees Celsius, and I think the air was about 11 or 12 degrees. So it's getting colder, and I just looked up to see if this is actually warmer now than it was the previous years, but it's actually pretty much the same. I just remember it being colder. So that's also a clue that I'm getting more cold adapted each year. I told my husband, well, shouldn't it be colder? And he's like, yeah, I think so. And then we looked it up and we're like, huh, it shouldn't.
We're definitely getting used to it.
Yeah, exactly. So, yeah.
Well, I mean, that's interesting. So let's take it back, because people might not know much about you. So let's go back, because the Danish love to swim. We know that. And they do like cold water swimming. But you've only recently got into it yourself. So you did it. You got into it for your research, and then you've become hooked. So when did you first take a cold water swim, and why not before?
Well, and that is a really good question. I mean, most people I meet, they started winter swimming and then they got interested in what's actually happening in the body. But I was not into cold swimming, and I was not into the cold at all. Even just going outside or going out to nature was just like, I had to put so much clothes on. I was cold inside. So I was something you can call a cold sissy. I've been always like that. And but during my research, I found out that activation of the brown fat is most profound if you do that in the cold. You can activate it in other ways, but the cold is definitely the most potent activator you have for your central nervous system. If you wanted to do that really rapidly, you want to heat up your inner radiator, as I call it, the brown fat, then it's the cold. So I went through the literature and I found out that you can sleep in a cold room, and if you sleep in a cold room, you will activate your brown fat, you will have more brown fat, and it will get even actually more brown fat. So it's not only just getting more of it, you would also have more of the white fat cells getting more beige, and those can also turn even more brownish. So you can increase the amount of brown fat that you have. But my hypothesis was actually that you don't have to even grow it bigger. You maybe get more just efficient brown fat cells, so they get more of the mitochondria in the cells, so they work even better, more efficient, so they can increase more heat. And as well as my hypothesis was very, you can say, fun, because then I thought, well, what about the winter swimmers? We have so many of those in Denmark. I'm not going to do it myself, but wouldn't it be fun just to study them? And we joked about it at the research center, but yeah, within very much short time, we actually thought, well, why not just actually do a study about that? And I was so happy because I wanted to do study in humans. But the first year, I was just observing.
Manager and chairman, I'll just move in between.
Can we just make sure we're on mute, everybody?
Manager talks too much. You have the replay, don't you?
Sorry, I just can't. It's just so loud.
Simon, if you can mute people for me, that would be great. I don't think I can.
But I went out the first year and talked to so many winter swimmers because I needed to find out what is this culture? Why is it so good? Why do you think it's healthy? And I heard so many stories and I wasn't convinced, I must say, because nobody could explain it. I was like, why do you think so? And a scientist asking non-scientist people what is actually going on, and they can't explain. And I was like, nobody knows what is going on, I thought. So I needed to dig into the literature. And so I started. And there is so much to read. And I had to go back to the 60s and read about all these physiology studies, what happens in the cold as soon as you go in, and what happens with norepinephrine. And I realized that, well, actually, if you just look at the physiology, it should fit with my hypothesis. So I got even more stuck on it. I was like, wow, this is actually backing up all the hypotheses that I had for my study. But I kept observing and taking in all these stories, and I kept reading and reading and reading to understand. But it wasn't until my professor, Bente Klarlund at the Center for Physical Activity Research at Rigshospitalet in Denmark, she asked me if I would like to write a book about it, because I was getting so engaged into this, and it was not even my sport, but I'm just a very passionate person. So I just loved the research about it. But then I started reading up and started writing on this book. And at first I was like, oh, I can't write a book about something I really don't know. And then all the winter swimmers said, eventually you have to jump in. You cannot just know everything what's going on in the body. And I must say, after reading all this literature, I understood what was going on. I understood it on a physiology level, on a biochemistry level. I understood that it should make you happy. And I understand happy as a theory and term, and I know when I'm happy myself, but I didn't understand it in my body. And I couldn't really connect it. It was not until the day where this family of winter swimmers, they were all winter swimmers in this family, and they invited me and my husband to go. And we went for the first time. And I remember it as being it was just so wild. It was so wild. We went to the sauna as well, so that saved me in a way. But we went back and forth 3 times, and it was just the best 2 seasons to really like get it under my skin and really get fond of it. But I think it's because I was such a cold sister. Yeah, that's my theory. Yeah.
And let's just go straight into some brown fat chat, because not everyone will know what that really is and what that means. So can you try and break it down in the simplest terms as possible? We're not all scientists.
I will try. I'll get rid of all the nitty-gritty stuff. So we have these 2 kinds of fat in our body. We have the white fat, which is the unhealthy fat that we want to get rid of. We need some of it, but we don't need as much as many people do today. So we have it on our stomach, on our bottom, and around our inner organs. And that's the unhealthy fat, which makes us insulin resistant, meaning that we have a risk of becoming diabetics. So a lot of the research in metabolism is around how can we lose weight, how can we turn our white fat into, or we can just increase our energy expenditure.
I put some washing on earlier.
So
please mute everybody. Please mute.
So the brown fat, on the other hand, is quite opposite. So the brown fat can increase energy expenditure. It can burn the fat and it can burn the sugar in your body. So the brown fat is using energy, and the white fat is building up energy. So it's building up storage, and the brown fat is using the storage. So that's quite opposite, these 2 kind of fat types. You can actually compare the brown fat with a muscle. If you compare it with a muscle, you will understand the physiology of it, because the brown fat cells are activated like a muscle cell. So a muscle cell needs to will be activated if you go out training or running or something like that. You will activate the mitochondria in the cell, and then it will increase your metabolism. And it will also increase your thermogenesis. The brown fat also does the same. So if you go out in the cold, that is the main activator, because it's the cold activates the temperature receptors in the skin, sends the signal to the brain, this is cold, and then norepinephrine is released to the body. And that is what activates the brown fat cell. it will be activated, increase thermogenesis, and we will get warm from the inside, our inner radiator. And as fuel, the brown fat cells use fat and sugar from the bloodstream to keep them going, to keep the temperature up in the body. So our brown fat is actually there to save us from the cold if we are getting cold in the wind, or just, it's actually there to nivellate our temperature. So if there's an unbalance, if you get a little bit cold on your skin, the brown fat will get the signals from the brain, but also directly from your skin receptors up to the brown fat, which is located, it's located just around the central nervous system. So under your supraclavicular bones, and down the spine, and also around the heart and the kidneys, there is a little bit. And it makes sense if you think about it, because that is actually our vital organs there in the center of our body. So from an evolutionary point of view, that is a good place to start warming you up if you get a little bit cold, right? So, but you could also ask yourself, is it a little bit overreacting? As soon as you get a little bit cold on your skin, then the brown fat is activated immediately. But that is our number one savior, because getting too cold, you could die, right? So, but your organs, your brain doesn't know when does the cold stop. So we have this organ in our body which always balances our temperature. So as soon as we get a little bit cold, it will activate, and then we will get a little bit hotter inside. So the hypothesis around my studies is, if you go out to the cold and you keep going winter swimming, you will keep activating the brown fat, and they will grow in size, and they will also get even better, more efficient for every cell, because they get more mitochondria in the cell. Then they will spend more of your energy in the body, and that is the fat and the sugar. So if you can do that, you will get warmer. That was my hypothesis, just a warmer person in terms, and you will also get increase your energy expenditure. And actually, that was also what we found. So that was quite fun, actually, to see that this actually fit.
So that is really fascinating, because one of the things that, you know, winter swimmers who are just starting, or, you know, many swimmers ask me, is how often they should go, once a week, once a day, to really make sure they're acclimatizing. And what would you say to that? You know, what is it a daily exposure that's the best, or could you get it from once a week?
Oh, I think I lost the connection a bit. It says my internet connection is unstable. I'm sorry about that, but I didn't get the question.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
I was saying, how often people say, how often do I need to swim to make sure I'm acclimatized to cold water? So how often would you recommend people swim in cold water? Every day, or once a week's enough?
So, and I will lean on to my study, which actually shows that if you go 2 to 3 times per week, that should be enough. And if you divide 11 minutes, which we found in my study, that 11 minutes per week was actually enough in the cold water.
Per week? Wow.
Per week, yeah, exactly. And this is also, I wanted to do a study where I didn't go extreme. I wanted to see with how little we could actually get away with and have health benefits. Because if you look back in this in history and these there's this scientist who discovered our stress syndrome. He showed that if you overstress the cells, they will get exhausted, and you will not have the health benefits. So you need to strengthen your cells, and the cells will get stronger if you hit that sweet spot where they get stronger. So it's called hormesis. Hormesis is when you stress the cells, and you can do that with cold, but you don't overstress them. So I wanted to find a balance. So I recruited winter swimmers who were adapted to cold water, at least 2 seasons it was, and I wanted them to be young, so I was sure that they didn't have any health diseases or anything that would interrupt my data. So they were average 24 years old, and we saw that by doing winter swimming only a few times a week, so 2 to 3 times and 11 minutes in total, they actually showed that they got a higher thermogenesis from the brown fat, so they had more activation of the brown fat, and they also got warmer. So they just physically were warmer than the control group, who were matched to this winter swimming group. We also saw that 57 minutes of sauna per week was actually also enough. So the protocol for that was to go to the water, dip first, then go to the sauna, in the water, then the sauna, and then you end on cold, I always say. Because if you end on cold, you will activate your metabolism even more, and you will force your body to warm up by yourself. And this was a term that I also explained to a professor from Stanford University, who's called, his name is Andrew Huberman. And he named this, you can call it a principle, he named it the Søberg principle. Ending cold is gonna increase your metabolism. So I defined it, but he named it. And I'm obviously very honored about that. I think it's so much fun. Yeah. So a couple of times
because although sauna culture is kind of taking off a little bit in the UK, an awful lot of us do not have access to a sauna, and so we often leave the water just freezing and trying to warm up.
Yeah,
So
well, you know what,
that
is also how I started, because I was not in the winter swimming club. So the first 2 years I was just being a winter swimmer. I didn't have the sauna, but my book was also about the sauna, because I read about the sauna as well, because I wanted to see, but what about this contrast therapy, because that is exactly what my study is about, the contrast between the cold water and going into the heat and back and forth. So I wanted to explore that in my studies, but I couldn't practice that myself. But I must say that now when I have the access to it, I completely love it, because then I can go back to the water and I can have more swims, and I can reach my 11 minutes goal per week and 57 minutes of heat also. The overlapping effects are very, very great. They are great. So I think that people, if it starts a sauna culture in the UK, that would be very cool. I hope so.
Yeah, I hope so. I mean, they are popping up all over the place, which is fantastic. So yeah, long may it continue. and could you just explain a little bit, because often, you know, we tell swimmers not to get into a hot shower or a hot bath after a swim, because we don't want to warm up too quickly, but a sauna is very different, isn't it? So, you know, how is that better for us when we're getting in and out of the cold to use sauna?
How is the sauna? You went out a bit. I think you asked me, is the sauna better than the cold shower or the warm shower?
A hot shower. You know, often we say to people, don't have a hot shower after a cold swim, because you're warming up too quickly and you can feel faint and unwell. But a sauna is very different, that kind of circular heat. Can you talk about the benefits of sauna after the cold?
Yeah. So you shouldn't end in the sauna, but definitely do the contrast where you're then in the cold water. But if you go to the sauna, you would have the benefits of the dilation of all the veins. So the temperature receptors in your skin have just been activated from the cold, but then there are the heat receptors also sending a signal as soon as you go into the sauna. But it is a much slower, as you say, activation of the thermoreceptors, and there will be this switch in the brain where you will have a slower transition to the heat. But if you sit 15 minutes to 20 minutes, studies show that this is actually enough to get a activation of what is called the heat shock proteins. And the heat shock proteins are in the cells there to protect the cells and repair the cells. So it is a really good thing to, if you look at like anti-aging and you wanna live longer. So we can actually see in this Finnish sauna studies that if you stay there for 15 to 20 minutes, also in the sauna each time you go, then you will have I think it's when you go 4 to 7 times per week, That is a lot, I know, but if you do that, then you will have a 50% lower mortality, total mortality they found in these studies. But if you go 2 to 3 times, which my studies show, then you will have a 23% lower mortality risk, all-cause mortality. And these studies they have measured this throughout the last, I think it's 26 or 27 years. So it's a long time where they have just looked at this, and they measured this up against sauna bathers only going once a week. So it's not measured to the general population or anything. It's actually measured up against some people who also uses the sauna. The studies also show that besides from in the cells activating the heat shock protein, you will also have eventually when you get a temperature. And why is this a good thing? And we actually also saw that in my studies, but having a lower core temperature can be beneficial for many things. So first of all, you will have a much, you can say, larger time span where you can sit in the heat. You will have more time for the body to actually to get out of the heat as well. That is the body's reaction to the heat. It thinks, oh, wow, we have to prepare for next time. So we will, so in the brain, this, you can say the baseline, the set point for your core temperature will decrease. So you have a larger escape window, you can say, to get out of the heat. And this is a really good thing if you, for example, are doing sport, because in sport, you often start hyperventilating because you actually get too hot. So a good thing for starting up your training or something is to decrease your core temperature. And by getting adapted to the heat, you have a better, you can say, condition to go into your physical sport or something, because then you have more, you can do more, obviously.
Yeah.
But it's actually very, you can, on a cell level, you can say that the heat shock proteins are repairing and keeping the cells alive for much longer, but you also have a large, you can say, the dilation of the veins and the contractions from the cold is, you can say, very good for your central nervous system. It is also very good for your cardiovascular system. So the main outcome from all this is that you decrease inflammation in the body because you activate the immune system, and because of the dilation and the contraction from the heat and back to the cold, you will get rid of a lot of inflammation and a lot of plaque that is inside the veins, and then you will actually have a lower blood pressure and a lower baseline heart rate. And we can measure that just based on one season of winter swimming and going into the heat.
Well, I mean, lots of people are converted by cold water swimming here. And you do talk about mental health in your book. So, you know, there's lots of sort of anecdotal evidence of people saying, you know, I don't need medication anymore after suffering depression. Have I lost you?
I heard something about mental health and depression, and a lot of people talk about this. So what did you find out about the benefits to our mental health as a result, like from a scientific point of view? So we don't have really randomized clinical studies showing that what does it do for can it cure a depression, can it cure anxiety? We don't have those studies yet, but we have a lot of, you can say, anecdotal studies, but we also have a case study actually from the UK. I think it's a very good one, which shows, and I also mentioned that in my book, and it's a story about, it's a case story about this young lady who wanted to, she's very depressed and she has an anxiety, and since she got her daughter, she wanted to get rid of all the medication because it made her brain very foggy and she didn't like being all this medication. So this scientist group, they made this program for her. So she started swimming, and after 3 months of swimming, she could get rid of all the medication. And I think that is so fantastic, because this story actually shows that going out in nature and swimming in the cold water, and just the thought about using yourself in this positive way and being out there can actually make yourself more positive. And the explanation for this and why this actually should work on air, you can still call it in theory, because we don't have those randomized controlled trials yet, but why it should work and why we hear that people say that it works is because of the activation of neurotransmitters in the brain. So we know that norepinephrine goes up by almost 250 up to 500 times if you go into the water. This will activate the brown fat, as I told you before, but this will also give you energy, drive. It will give you this freshness that people tell you that they feel fresh afterwards they have been in the water. They also get this energy and get a little bit high from it. And the highness is also the dopamine kicking in. And dopamine is very interesting, I think, in this regard, because the dopamine and the norepinephrine is exactly what antidepressant pill, because nature, dip yourself in the water, and you can get the same amount of norepinephrine spike, and you can get the same amount of dopamine spike up to 250% above baseline, just going into the water for a few minutes. And that is actually enough to get this spike. You can actually compare this to a dopamine spike on the level of nicotine and alcohol and cocaine. But the difference is that if you do cocaine, you will have a rapid crash afterwards. But you don't do that with the water, with the cold water. We see that the dopamine is like flattening out, but it takes hours. So 3 to 4 hours after, which is actually imitating the circadian rhythm of dopamine in your body. So dopamine goes like this all day. It's normal, but some have like very big spikes and very low, and they feel these mood swings, and they have this urge also to find something to get them on a high again, because they get a little bit low. So what you could do is just go to the water. That's what I always tell people. So if you have a bad mood, then go to the water, because they will definitely get your dopamine up.
Absolutely, I can definitely relate to that. And before I sort of pass it over to see if anyone's asked any questions, I was just curious, so you're still swimming, and why do you still swim? What are the benefits that you've personally found, how it's changed your life?
Oh, I think there's so much. I mean, this is like now starting to be like something that I love to do. This my whole life is like, oh, when can we go to the water? And I also bring my husband, I bring my kids even, and they love it too, because we also have the sauna, and then they feel a little bit safe from the from the cold. And also it's just the community around it. And that is fascinating too, because what is actually going on when we go out in the water is that you activate the norepinephrine, you activate the dopamine, you actually get this high on it. And what happens when we go together? We survive. Every time we go to the cold water, the brain thinks, oh, I'm going to die again. We activated the sympathetic nervous system, but we also activated the parasympathetic nervous system. Nervous system is our survival instinct. And when we find out that we didn't die, that connects us because we survived together. So I don't know if you've been on other, you can say, people going to also to other places in the army and doing all these kind of challenges together, that it bonds people, because if you survive something, you go through something really hard together. This is like getting people connected. And this connection is what I hear about when I go out and do I do a lot of talks in different winter swimming clubs, and I really love going there and talking to also to people like you. You are winter swimmers as well. So I really enjoy that, hearing all these studies about how this community is really engaging, and people can just get new friends, and exactly that is actually a problem in our society. I think we don't have enough community. We don't have enough places to go. Even some people are very lonely, and stress and depression are going up. I think we need more clubs to get there and have this this bonding that we can have from going into the water.
Yeah, I mean, I think lots of people on this call will relate. I think definitely in winter, especially, you know, it's that lots of people sort of end up going indoors and spending more time indoors, but actually winter swimmers still have that lovely friendship and community, and keeps us connected. Quite a difficult time of year. It's dark, and you know, we get a much nice weather, and
exactly.
Simon, are you still on the call? I can't see him.
Yeah, I'm still here. So I was keeping quiet and listening. I'm waiting for it. No one's put any questions in the comments yet. So, but I've got one while I'm waiting. So yeah, so please, you know, if anyone's got any questions for Susanna, if you could put them in the comments, and we get to them. And while you're thinking of your questions, I've got one of my own, if that's okay. So Susanna, you did your study on young people at 24 years old. I think the average age of our reader is a little bit older than that. So it's around about 48. Would there be any reason for those benefits to be different, or in older people, or not to see the benefits in the same way, or maybe see them in a bigger way even?
Yeah, so regarding the metabolism, I definitely think that when we do the measures in younger people, we will see it in a metabolism that is already as perfect as it can be, right? So they were regular fit, and they didn't have any health issues. So what I think was interesting was actually after I did the study, excuse me, I wanted to see what actually happens when you do cold swimming and going into the heat as well. So the contrast therapy in people who have like a disrupted metabolism. So I studied a group of people with pre-diabetes. So people who have, you can say they're in the gray zone. They don't have diabetes yet, but they are not quite healthy either. So they were obese and also had a decreased insulin sensitivity. But what I think is interesting here is that with age, we just know that our brown fat decreases, the amount of it and the efficiency of the brown fat will decrease by age. So as soon as you come over the age of 40, I don't know, we need more studies on that, I think, because I think that in my studies, I've also seen that if you are 70, you can have a lot of brown fat. And I was surprised about that because I was told they don't have anything, but it was completely wrong. I can tell you that, even though it's not published yet, but just keep it a secret. But we definitely see that people who go a lot outside, they will activate the brown fat. And that is why I say, if you shouldn't be, you can say, you shouldn't think about your age as a problem. Definitely not. You should just keep the brown fat alive, and you will do that by going into the cold, and you can winter swim and you can activate it, and it will stay alive in that way. But it's definitely less efficient if you have insulin resistance. If you're insulin resistant, that means that if your cells are not really can't take the sugar in from your bloodstream, that means that you're insulin resistant. So if you have a little bit of low insulin resistancy, then it's going to be a problem. So the results from my studies from the younger translated if you have you can say your metabolism. So if you're healthy and you're above 40, I think the results are applied to you.
Okay. All right. So while you're answering that, the questions actually came in quite quickly. So we've collected a good number of questions. So
okay.
Let's see if we can rattle through them quite quickly. So one of them, the first one is: are there any illnesses or conditions that might prevent you or indicate that you should avoid cold water swimming?
Yeah. So I think that because of the activation of the sympathetic nervous system as soon as you go into the water, and the activation of the parasympathetic nervous system. So the one system wants to increase the heart rate and also increase the blood pressure, and the other system wants it to go down. And this happens at the same time, and actually makes a conflict in our cardiovascular system on the heart. So it's a bit of a bit rough if you are a new winter swimmer, you just want to start out. So I always say that start from summer, because it's more easy for the body to adapt to the cold as the temperature drops. But also if you have problems with your heart diseases, unregulated high blood pressure, for example, or you are operated in your heart, then I would say take it easy or just don't do it. At least you should talk to your doctor about it, because it is, like I said, a strainer to your to your system.
Okay, so the point about the summer, that leads quite nicely into the next question. The next question is about, is there an actual temperature above which you don't see the benefits, or is there, they've heard that it's 11 degrees, that you need to be below 11 degrees to get the benefits. Is that something you can confirm or
yeah, so yeah, I did quite a bit of research around this. If you can, in this book, that you will find a quite big section about the safety of winter swimming and going into the cold. Because when I started this, I told you I wasn't a winter swimmer, and I told my publisher, I'm going to write this book because they wanted me to do that. And I said, but you have to accept that when I go into all this literature, that I might find out that this is not healthy, and we're still going to publish that book. And she promised me that. And but that's why there's a big section about that. But one thing I wanted to really dig into is, how cold is cold water? What is cold water? And what I found was that the accidents actually happens when the temperature in the water was 15 degrees and below. So I put in the definition, says that the water is cold water swimming when it's 15 degrees and below, because that's when we see accidents happening because of the temperature of the water.
So that's accidents, but what about the benefits? When is there a temperature below which you need to be to get the benefits? Yeah,
so that I also think that the body, there's so much going on in the body when you go into the cold water. So you can definitely talk about a dose response. As soon as as colder as it gets, you don't have to stay as long, because you will get the benefits quicker, because you will have a much more rapid activation of the sympathetic nervous system, and also a quicker transition over to the parasympathetic nervous system. And those two systems have different benefits. I can talk about that also, but as soon as you actually are a little bit colder on your skin, and you are very warm on your skin, right? So as soon as you just get a little bit colder, and it could be 19 degrees, actually is enough on your skin to activate your brown fat. I have tested that. But you can also have a bucket of water with 4 degrees and put your hand or foot into it, and you will also activate your brown fat. So it's not always about just getting it as cold as possible. You don't have to do that. So I always say that try and shift the temperature. If you don't have natural water and you use a bucket or a barrel, or what people use, tops and stuff, they should change the temperature, because then you also activate the cells in different ways, and you challenge them. And that is what we need to do, because that keeps them healthy. So the temperature should vary, and there is not a specific temperature I think that you should go for.
Okay. Thank you for that. So the next question is around social prescribing, and I don't know if that's something you have in Denmark. It's something we have here, that if you go to a GP, rather than prescribing medication, they can prescribe other activities. And there's a bit of a call, I guess, for GPs to be able to prescribe cold water swimming for certain conditions. And I wonder, I mean, the question is, what would we have to do collectively to encourage that? But I think probably more relevant for you is, have you ever seen anything like that in Denmark? And is there a model we could perhaps copy or steal for the UK?
No. And I think, yeah, so I don't think it's going to happen just around the corner, because there is still debate, and a lot of people debating whether cold water swimming is actually healthy for you. And even though there is so much actually showing that, and I think it's a little bit it's unnecessary, and I think it's a shame that the nature gives us so much health, and you can prevent so much with this, and it's only going out 20 minutes just go for a walk in the forest will decrease your norepinephrine by 21% within 20 minutes, and it's difficult to find something else that can do that. And going into the water, you will increase your norepinephrine and dopamine 250% within a few minutes. And can you find something else that can do this? It's really difficult, but still, people are scared about the cold water because of the strain to the heart and also the cardiovascular system. So it's going to take a while for people to get convinced about this, but I'll keep going. I'll keep talking about it.
All right. Now, I think you've possibly already addressed the next question when you talked about dose response. But the next question is about how many minutes do you need to be in cold water to get the health benefits? And I think you've already addressed that sort of the colder it is, the less time you need to be in. But is there any, do you have any sort of scale on that you can put numbers to, or does it depend on the individual?
Yeah, so exactly. So it all depends on the individual. How cold adapted are you? And what's your body composition as well? Because that also has a lot to do with it. So how much muscle mass do you have? What is your fat percentage? And also how fit you are actually. It also depends on that. It depends on a lot of things. So it's also how much brown fat do you actually have? How efficient is it? How insulin resistant is your cells in your body? So that goes back to how fit you actually are. So I don't think one scale fits all. You can say it doesn't really, but you can use the 11 minutes per week as like a model for yourself. Then you know, well, within this window, then you have like the sweet spot, and you won't get too much and you won't get too little either, because these winter swimmers were different people, of course, but they all showed the same benefits in different ways and a little bit variation. So. Okay. But you, of course, well, a few minutes, if we talk about one dip, I would say that if you can get over the cold shock response, that meaning that you can get your activation of the parasympathetic nervous system, then you would definitely have the spike of the norepinephrine, the dopamine, and you also have the activation of the serotonin, which is good for mental balance. Okay, so 2 to 3 minutes to get over the cold water shock would be enough. Okay. It's actually enough, yeah. And next question, and I haven't seen your book, unfortunately, so I don't know if you've addressed this in your book at all, is asking about cold water swimming and prevention of dementia. And if that is anything that you've covered in your research, or that no, I haven't. And there is not much studies around that, as far as I know. But I think the Finnish sauna studies, where they also do cold swimming and the contrast therapy while going into the sauna, shows that there are health benefits also regarding the mental health on dementia and also Alzheimer's disease. And this can be explained actually from also the activation of the BDNF, which is and you can say it's a neurotransmitter. You will also have the activation of the dopamine. You will have the activation of the norepinephrine, which will also make your brain more fresh, and it will also increase what is that called? The neuroplasticity. It's not. It's the repair of the neurons, which is the BDNF. Also makes your brain faster, and you will remember more, and you will be better at concentrating. And I think that is actually what some of the key points when you have dementia, that you can't the communication between the centers in the brain doesn't really work that well, and the cold water swimming, the cold and the heat, will actually increase that. Okay. And next question is about cold water swimming in a wetsuit. So the person, it's actually they've sent this question directly to me, but I don't think they mind if I read it out. This person prefers to do longer swims in the winter because I think they want a training fitness benefit as well. So they're swimming in a wetsuit so they can stay in the water longer, and wearing the wetsuit to avoid hypothermia. Will they still get the cold water benefits? I guess the question is, do they get cold?
Okay. Let's see
Well,
if they may answer that later down there in the chat. So,
I don't care how they get cold. I mean, you could also just use a cold shower. You will only activate the sympathetic nervous system by doing that, but you will still get cold. You can also turn down the heater at home and you will also get a bit colder, and you will activate your brown fat even more. As soon as you get cold, actually, you will start having these benefits. But the cold water is definitely the most potent increaser for all the neurotransmitters as well, and how fast you will activate your metabolism. So if this person using a wetsuit gets cold from swimming, and not only hot, and I guess they would get cold, right? So I guess they would have some benefits.
Okay. Okay, I'm going to read the next question. I'm not even sure if it's okay, so the question is about the effect of cold water on adrenaline, epinephrine, and the difference with norepinephrine. Sorry, I'm having trouble reading these. How does each neurotransmitter affect the nervous system?
Okay, that was a lot of questions. So do they ask the difference between? Well, is there something about the difference? Well, norepinephrine is noradrenaline, right? So it's the same. It's just two different words for the same thing. So it's the activator of the brown fat, which I talked about before, and that is that gives you energy. So norepinephrine and adrenaline. Adrenaline comes from from the glands above the kidneys, which will then increase this hormone. So it's both a hormone and it's also a neurotransmitter. But as soon as this increases, you will have more energy, because then you should escape from the cold, because we see it as a risk to our health. But you will also have the activation of the brown fat. And the other question was what neurotransmitters?
How does each neurotransmitter affect the nervous system?
Okay, so I think I touched upon that. So dopamine will give you drive and motivation to keep doing what you are doing. So if you, for example, and this could be actually related to good things and bad things. So bad things could be that you get addicted. It's called addicted to nicotine or alcohol, or it could be substances in different ways. So if you get happy about that afterwards, you do the drug, and then you will have a spike of dopamine, and that will be related to your behavior. So you will want to do that once more time. But the difference, as I told you before, the difference is when you go to the cold water, you have this spike of dopamine again, or you will have it even higher actually, but you will not have the quick rapid drop afterwards. But you will have a longer tail, but you will have a relation with that to the cold water, which is not a bad habit. So if you can get a spike of dopamine, that will give you drive and motivation, and it will also increase your happiness. Serotonin is another one, which also increases when you go into the cold water, if you can stay long enough to get over the cold shock, because it's released from the activation of the parasympathetic nervous system and the vagus nerve stimulation. And that will give you this mental balance afterwards. I don't know if you have felt this relief or this good feeling in your body afterwards, like, oh, it's okay, everything is okay. It's just this feeling of it being okay. And it lasts for the day, or maybe lasts for more days. But if you keep swimming, then you will have like this, you can say, baseline, which is higher for your mental health.
Okay. We're still getting lots of questions coming in, probably more than we can get through. So I may have to.
There's also a big section about the after drop, I wanted to say, because
so there is one question about after drop.
Okay.
And the question is that they experience feeling spaced out and dizzy for a few seconds after a swim if the water's less than around 10 degrees.
Okay.
And the theory that that someone else has explained to them was that that's the blood pressure restabilizing after the cold water immersion. They want to know if that is correct, or if there's another
do you know how do you know how long they stay in the water, or so they get dizzy after?
This is
This is actually
they haven't put, there's not that much detail. It says, I sometimes experience feeling spaced out, dizzy for a few seconds post swim, sub 8 to 10 degrees. I'm told this is my blood pressure restabilizing itself. Is this correct?
Can I just come in there, because that's actually from me. I can answer that question. So, just very quickly, it seems quite common. I was just getting a little bit anxious there. You were going to say there's something wrong with me, but most of my colleagues have experienced something very similar, and they say it's just sort of 10 seconds of just feeling very lightheaded and a bit spaced out. We are normally in the water, if it's under 10 degrees, we're only allowed in the water for up to 20 minutes. So we probably wouldn't be in for very long. I'm hearing what you say, though, about being in less than that, but it's lifeguarded, it's very monitored, so they keep an eye on us. But quite a few of us have had this kind of dizzy feeling for about 10 seconds. And the instructions we get is don't fight it. It's just your blood pressure restabilizing. After 10 seconds, you'll be fine. And I have been, to be fair, I've been fine, and I've got it and carried on doing what I'm doing. So I was just curious about it, really.
Okay, I can answer that. So what happens is that when you go into the cold water, you will have so rapid a constriction in your blood vessels. Also because it seems like if you are in the water for that long, you are already really cold adapted. Well, you must be. But then because of the constriction of the veins and the rapid decrease in blood flow to the brain of 30%, you will definitely get a little bit dizzy, because your system is efficient also at constricting and keeping you safe from and keeping your warm blood in the center of your core of your body, in the core. So if you can imagine that if your body reacts that quickly to getting into the cold water, you will not have as much blood as you had just before in your limbs and also in your head. And that could get you a little bit like dizzy and a little bit lightheaded. But I think that is when you just wait a bit, and also you have lifeguards and stuff around you, and also the swim buddies, then it will open up again as soon as you go from the cold shock to the parasympathetic nervous system. The veins will open again, because then you are relaxed again. And when you're relaxed in the parasympathetic nervous system, then your veins will open. They're not that big, of course, but they will open, and you will have blood coming more to the brain again, a blood flow to the brain again, but you will also have to actually to your skin. So you can get a little bit red skin when you actually get up from the water, right? Yeah, that is the explanation for that as well.
The lobster effect.
The lobster effect. Yes.
Thank you so much. That answers my question beautifully. Thank you.
Yeah. All right, we've got about 5 minutes left, so I'm going to try and get 2 more questions in 5 minutes if we can. So the question is, what are the warning signs that you should stop cold water swimming? Now, I don't know whether the person that's Brian might be able to clarify, if you want to jump in, Brian, whether that means in the moment that you're swimming, or whether if there's any long-term condition that suggests you shouldn't swim. Brian, can you clarify in 5 seconds what you meant in the question?
It's more a general question, because we're always talking about how good cold water swimming is, but we never talk with regards to the warning symptoms, that you get so addicted to it because your endorphins are up and you want to go swimming, and you understand the reasons why. But there must be certain signs you've got to be careful of with regards to, if you go cold water swimming, when to stop, and when your body's saying you need to stop, what those signs are.
Exactly. So I'm in my book now because I wanted to show you that I have this chapter, and it's not to scare people off. It's just to give you some information which is based on, of course, on the science. And I wanted to show you this. Where is it? Just a second, because I made this where I tell what happens at every degree that your core temperature drops. So you actually would know what are the symptoms of losing a degree in your core when you're 36 degrees. Oh, it's here. Oh, it's here. Okay, so the symptoms are here. If you are 25 degrees in your core, you will die. So that's definitely the last one. So don't wait until then. But as soon as you drop just 1 degree, it says that the body begins to shiver visibly. So I always say to people, if you start shiver, then go up, because these are the warning signs that you are getting hypothermic. And there's no reason to stay longer than that. It's not that shivering in itself is unhealthy, because when you shiver, you actually increase your metabolism, which is good, but you should not stay in the water and get even colder, because as you probably know, according to the after drop, that being in the water is not the coldest you will be. You will be even colder when you go out, because the blood vessels open and the warm blood from your core will go out and to the cold tissue and then back again, and then you will have a drop. So, but as soon as you are at 35 degrees, you will be confused and disorientated. So, and you will have diminished muscle coordination. So I don't know if that answers your question, but there is like a bit of information here where you can go and see what actually happens at every degree according to studies of people who have been in an accident. So you will know what happens.
Thank you.
So the last question, hopefully it has a yes or no answer. One person on the talk here is heading to Copenhagen tomorrow, and they want to know if they can buy a copy of your book in English while they're in Denmark.
Oh, yeah, no, I think that you can on online. Actually, I've seen my English book, but it's online. It's not in a physical store here, as far as I know, at least. But at I think it's saxo.com. I think you can buy it online there, but otherwise you can buy it from Amazon. But I don't have anywhere where you can buy the English one.
Okay, so yeah, it's 8 o'clock, so Ella's going to wrap things up. I know there are still questions that we haven't got round to, I'm afraid.
It's in the book.
One of the questions is, have we recorded? We have recorded it, and we will share the link. Once we have to just chop the beginning off the video when we're chatting amongst ourselves. So. So yeah, we'll get that uploaded and shared as soon as we can, and I'll hand back to Ella to thank you, because she always does that much better than I can do. But thank you very much. It's been very interesting, and so yeah, round of applause from me, and over to Ella to round things up.
Thank you so much, Susanna. It's been great, really informative. I think lots of people, from looking at the comments, have got a lot out of that. So thank you, really appreciate your time. And if you haven't already, you can read the feature in this month's magazine, and of course you can buy Susanna's book. It is published now in the UK, so all good bookshops have it. Yeah, if you're heading to Denmark, enjoy a swim there with Susanna one day.
Well, thank you very much for inviting me. And
thank you, everybody.
Thank you very much. Okay, bye-bye.
Bye, take care, everyone. Thank you.